With the Philadelphia 76ers season just about entirely off the rails, the focus of Daryl Morey has shifted to building out the bottom of the roster. With plenty of roster moves incoming and more to come, the Sixers took a chance at David Roddy, bringing him in on a 10-day contract. I want to break down what he can bring to the Sixers organization, why I do think this is an interesting signing, and how there is a little poetic tie to the Sixers organization overall. So to dive into exactly what we know, first I want to start off with a little bit of an interesting breakdown dating back to his college days. And this account tweets, exclusive PHI space, says, David Roddy is certainly an interesting 10-day signing for the Sixers. He was a former standout at Colorado State who averaged 19.2 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, and 43.5% from three during his final year there. In the NBA, he's played for Memphis, Phoenix, Atlanta, and now Philly. And to give the full press release from the Sixers' perspective, it writes, the Philadelphia 76ers president of basketball operations, Daryl Morey, announced today that the team has signed David Roddy to a 10-day contract. Roddy appeared in 27 games with 3 starts for the Atlanta Hawks this season, averaging 4.5 points on 47.3% shooting, 37.2% from beyond the three-point arc. Also adding 2.6 rebounds and 1.1 assists, he produced a season-high 17 points on 5 of 10 field goals on October 10th at Washington, one of his 5 games scoring in double figures this season. Now in his 3rd NBA season, Roddy has appeared in 162 games with 20 starts with Memphis, Phoenix, and Atlanta, posting career averages of 6.3 points and 2.9 rebounds per game. Roddy was originally selected by Philadelphia with the number 23 overall pick in the 2022 draft before his draft rights were acquired by Memphis. His pro experience follows a 3-year collegiate career at Colorado State, where he produced 15.5 points, 7.4 rebounds, and 2.4 assists in 91 games, with 76 of those being starts. He capped out the Rams' career by being named the 21-22 Mountain West Conference Player of the Year after averaging the 4th most points in the conference with 19.2 points on 57.1% shooting from the field and the 6th highest rebound mark at 7.5 per game. Roddy will wear number 45 for the Sixers. Now, to talk a little bit about the ties to the Sixers, it did mention in that press release that he was initially drafted by the Sixers organization. He was shipped out on draft day in the trade that netted us De'Anthony Melton, an excellent move by Daryl Morey at the time and even to this day. And what this trade was officially at the time, Philadelphia 76ers president of basketball operations Daryl Morey announced Friday that the team had acquired De'Anthony Melton in a trade with the Memphis Grizzlies. In the trade, Philadelphia sent the draft rights to the number 23 selection in the 2022 draft, which was David Roddy, and Danny Green to Memphis. And he said, quote, we don't need the Danny Green quote. We know who Danny Green is at this point. To talk a little bit more about David Roddy specifically, he's an interesting player, man. This is another example of the Sixers taking swings on young talent. Still a guy who has not found his footing at the NBA. As it mentioned, that he has bounced around a decent bit here. And this, pulling up the subscribers. So if you like what we're doing here on Sixers Digest, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button. At this point, 70% of you guys have not subscribed just yet. We got to get through this season one way or another. So want as many along with the ride with me as possible. So make sure you're hitting that button if you have not already. But to talk more about David Roddy, a guy who has bounced around the league, probably had some of his most success really in his early days with Memphis. Thought he had a pretty good rookie season, and he's a guy who I wasn't particularly high on coming out of college. I thought he was a dude who had a little bit of his best season in that final year, and that kind of blew up his draft stock in a way that I didn't necessarily agree with. To this day, I'm still a little bit surprised that he did end up being a first-round pick, but that does not mean that I don't believe in him from an overall talent perspective. He's a guy who plays with a strong physicality, is a big body player. He's got a little bit of the Georges Niang or Gershon Yabusele in him, that he's a thick guy. He's going to be putting it to you, putting muscle on you, but he also is capable of still rising up and dunking on you, sort of in the same Yabusele breath there. And you can kind of see, I took a quick little screenshot of this dunk on Ivica Zubac, who, by the way, is having an incredible season with the Clippers this year, but you can see the level of verticality that he can still get up for. He's sort of a small forward, power forward type archetype. I think probably the best case scenario for David Roddy is if he can follow a little bit of an archetype of like a Bojan Bogdanovic type of player, that you are more of a power forward, a rebounding threat, but still a guy who can absolutely light it up from three. Whether or not that can be the case is to be determined, but these are the right style of players that the Sixers are bringing in. Taking swings on guys who have not quite found their footing in the league, but the talent seems to be there. We saw them sign Chuma Okeke earlier this week, and by the way, I messed up that pronunciation of the first name. I believe Okeke is how it's supposed to be said, which I was unfamiliar with. We saw a brief look at him on the floor, not enough to really say one way or another, and with the Sixers team, it has only occurred in losses thus far, so who knows? We're recording this before the Raptors game today, so maybe we get a better look at them in the actual Sixers system in one of those opportunities. David Roddy will not be available for this matchup, so we will not have a feel for him at that point, but I do agree with the mindset the Sixers are taking here. Why do I say that? Of course, there is still a season left to be played, but the view has to be expanded past this year. When you take a peek at this Sixers depth chart, you are seeing how things are beginning to fill out. That obviously this starting lineup is still one that is built to compete with Tyrese Maxey, with Paul George, with Kelly Oubre Jr., and shout out to Justin Edwards, by the way, who does seem like he is really locking down that starting spot. It will be interesting if they do ultimately go back to Gershon Yabusele there, if he ends up being the guy. Caleb Martin was the other guy sort of picked for that, but he obviously has been traded away. There also does seem to be a belief in Quentin Grimes, and I've liked what I've seen from him so far. I'm not the biggest Quentin Grimes guy in the world. I can see there's a lot of believers on the timeline when kind of scrolling through things. I like Grimes. I think he's a fine player. I don't know if I visualize him as this future starting caliber shooting guard in the way that I think a lot of people do, but I would love to be wrong about this, that I've been impressed by what I have seen from him so far in a Sixers uniform, a really willing shooter, and that's another example of Morey sort of pulling from the bargain bin, getting a guy, and he will be a restricted free agent, so I do believe the intention is to resign him with Quentin Grimes there, so well done by Morey. And Justin Edwards has officially gotten his contract upgraded from a two-way contract to a standard NBA deal. Would not shock me if he continues to serve in that starting lineup, and he has been straight up excellent. Very impressed with how quickly things are clicking for him, and a guy who is very comfortable just playing within his role. To keep it rolling beyond that, towards the bottom of the roster is when we're starting to see the real image of this. Jared Butler, another guy who was traded for at the deadline, was a guy who was previously on a two-way contract. Would not shock me if once these 10 days expire with Roddy and with OKK there, that he gets upgraded to a standard deal. I like Jared Butler. Didn't love what I saw with him with that Bucks game, but it was already sort of a blowout to that point, so that isn't going to be something that I hold entirely against him too. The guy that I would be frustrated with, or the guy that I would be looking over my shoulder if I was him right now, would be Jeff Doughton Jr., as I don't think that Jared Butler would be a part of the Sixers organization if there was this genuine belief in Jeff Doughton Jr. Feel a little bit bad for Jeff. I think he falls into that category of like that, quadruple A caliber player, meaning he's a little bit too good to play in the G League. Certainly one of the best players down there, but can't quite crack a real deal NBA rotation. Will be interesting how his story continues to be written there. And even a little bit deeper, you can see Ricky Council IV, a guy that's a little bit more established than a lot of the names that I'm mentioning, but still sort of, a young player they're hoping can play through the reps. And by the way, had a career high 8 assists earlier this week. So shout out to Ricky there. Adem Bona, another dude who's going to benefit from playing through his mistakes. So while the focus is on continuing to contend if they have the opportunity this season, it does feel like development has climbed up the list of priorities in a way that I don't think any one of us would have expected this season. And I do think that is the right decision here. If Daryl Morey can stumble upon a key piece of the future rotation, whether that be Chuma Okeke, whether that be David Roddy, whether that be Jared Butler or Quentin Grimes here being a significant part of the Sixers team, that would be a massive win looking ahead to next year. And that is sort of what I think the game plan is going to be from here. That final spot, and for that roster spot, they're now up to 14 standard deals now that Justin Edwards has been converted, but they do have that additional spot. And it will be interesting if they continue to go the 10-day route, that you are just rotating through guys, or if they do ultimately upgrade Jared Butler to a standard contract and allow him to play through his mistakes. I would be curious to see what exactly that looks like too. But the fact of the matter being, there's still a lot of basketball left to be played this year as we begin to cruise into the All-Star break, and Daryl Morey continuing to work the margins, do his job. Again, as much as the critiques are legitimate for the top end of this roster, the guy's not producing as expected with the Paul Georges, the Joel Embiid, the availability not happening there. I do think Daryl does deserve his flowers for rebuilding the young talent in this organization and sort of finding a way to retool and create this next generation in a way that is very difficult. A slam dunk draft pick with Jared McCain at 16, a slam dunk draft pick with Tyrese Maxey at 21 there, and adding some of these other key pieces, the Adem Bonas, the Paul Reeds, the Isaiah Joes, the Ricky Councils, and I know that some of these names have left the organization already, but it's kind of difficult when you are typically picking in the higher end of that first round, or I guess the lower end when looking at it from that perspective. It is difficult to add quality win-now role players. I think the Sixers have done a pretty nice job of that, and we'll be excited to see what these guys grow into. So I'm not saying to rush out and buy a David Roddy jersey just yet. Let's see how these 10 days do go. But this is an interesting player to me, and I do think that there is a clear role that he could fill on the Sixers team. They still are a little bit light at the power forward spot, with Yabusele being really the only true four on this team. And it will be interesting if Roddy gets more of an opportunity because of that. But we will see what happens from there. And as I mentioned, if you're liking what we're doing here on Sixers Digest, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button. 71.2% of you guys have not subscribed to the channel just yet. We are going to get through this season one way or another, no matter how painful, or maybe the better days are still to come. So I want each and every one of you along for the ride with me. So smash that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video. Any comments that you have below. I want to hear what you guys think of the David Roddy signing. Is this one that juices you up, you're fired up, and do believe this is a future part of the organization, or is this just a 10-day guy that will be lost with time? To be determined at this point, but appreciate each and every one of you guys for rocking with me as always. Be back talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.